What if the most important work in your story has already been done before a reader ever opens the book? Not by you, not by your editor, by evolution itself. Today we're going to talk about something that quietly separates fiction that lands from fiction that labors. It's the idea that the reader is not a blank slate. The reader arrives at page 1 already carrying the most important equipment in the entire transaction. A human nervous system, wired over hundreds of thousands of years of social evolution, preloaded with responses to certain patterns of experience. If you're writing fiction or studying creative writing, this single shift in understanding can change everything about how you write. Let's start with the core problem. Some writers believe their job is to teach the reader how to feel. They explain the emotional weight of every decision. They label the moral significance of each turn. They annotate their character's behavior just in case the reader misses it. The prose works hard to manufacture feeling, instead of trusting the reader to experience it. And it fails. Not because the writing is clumsy, but because it misunderstands where emotional response actually comes from. The writer's deepest job is not to create emotional truth. It is to locate it, and then trust the reader's wiring to complete the circuit. So where does that wiring come from? The human brain did not evolve as a general-purpose reasoning machine. It evolved as a survival mechanism for a social primate, living in small, high-stakes groups, where belonging meant survival and exclusion meant death. Certain response patterns are wired so deeply they predate language. They predate complex culture. They operate faster than conscious thought. These preloaded responses include the need to read social hierarchy, acute sensitivity to fairness violations and betrayal, instinctive detection of in-group versus out-group, the reflex of loyalty and its mirror, the sting of abandonment, the capacity for shame, which is not private guilt, but social exposure, the recognition of dominance and submission in body, voice, and gesture, and the need to impose narrative order on chaotic experience. Research on moral foundations has identified 6 of these that appear across all human cultures: care and harm, fairness and cheating, loyalty and betrayal, authority and subversion, sanctity and degradation, liberty and oppression. And here is the finding that matters most for fiction writers. Moral intuitions arrive first, fast, automatic. Reasoning comes after, as justification. We know before we think. The thinking is often just a story we tell ourselves about why we already knew. Readers bring this entire apparatus to every story they read. They are not passive recipients. They are active pattern matchers, running continuous, largely unconscious recognition protocols against the events on your page. Now, let's look at the universal structures that activate this wiring. Certain human social patterns appear across cultures separated by thousands of years and thousands of miles, with no contact between them. Their independent convergence on the same architecture suggests they are not cultural inventions. They are expressions of something conserved in the species. The first one is order from chaos. The human need to impose structure on experience is not just psychological preference, it is survival behavior. Groups that could coordinate around shared rules and codes outlasted those that could not. Fiction that dramatizes the establishment of order, the defense of a code, or the collapse of structure triggers deep recognition. The reader does not need to be told that chaos is threatening. The nervous system already knows. The second one is the brotherhood bond. The warrior brotherhood appears independently in the Roman legions, in Spartan military culture, in Zulu regimental systems, in Plains Indian warrior societies, in the Japanese samurai tradition, and in dozens of other societies across history. And the architecture is remarkably consistent. A threshold experience involving mortal risk or extreme ordeal, a period of separation from ordinary life, shared suffering that dissolves individual ego into collective identity, a code of conduct that is felt, not recited, and an emotional economy running almost entirely on nonverbal signals. This structure produces the bond because it was designed by experience to produce exactly that bond. Men who trusted each other completely under mortal conditions survived. Men who did not, often did not. The emotional power of the warrior brotherhood in fiction is not a literary convention. It is biological memory. And here is the craft lesson hidden inside this. The restraint of emotional expression within that bond is not suppression. It is the language, the grunt, the nod, the pushed-out chair, the showing up without being asked. These carry more weight than paragraphs of declared feeling. Because the reader's nervous system reads them correctly and immediately, without assistance. The third structure is moral intuition. Readers know, before they can explain it, when a character has crossed a line. They feel the wrongness of betrayal before the narrative names it. They recognize the moment a man's code fails him. The moment a woman's loyalty is tested past its limit. The moment a child understands something the adults are trying to hide. This recognition is not literary sophistication. It predates literacy by a wide margin. The implication for writers is significant. Fiction does not need to editorialize about moral weight. The reader is already tracking it. What fiction must do is dramatize the situation with enough specificity and honesty that the reader's wiring has something real to respond to. The fourth structure is the rite of passage. Every human culture has developed rituals marking the crossing of thresholds. Childhood to adulthood, outsider to insider, the living to the dead. These rituals exist because the threshold crossings are real, and the psyche requires acknowledgement of them. Fiction that dramatizes genuine threshold crossing, without sentimentalizing it, without explaining it, triggers recognition. The reader has been wired for these moments since the first story told around the first fire. The fifth structure is exile and return. Expulsion from the group, and the possibility of return, is one of the most ancient narrative structures, because it maps directly onto one of the most ancient human fears. The hero who crosses into danger and cannot fully return as who they were is not a literary invention. It is the shape of an actual kind of human experience, encoded over hundreds of thousands of repetitions. Joseph Campbell mapped it as the monomyth. Evolutionary psychologists map it as adaptive narrative processing. The reader just calls it true. So how do we put all of this together as writers? I want to leave you with what I'd call the two-sided contract. When a writer accesses this archetypal substrate genuinely and renders it with enough specificity and honesty, something specific happens between the text and the reader. The reader's nervous system recognizes the pattern and completes the emotional circuit without being told to. This is not interpretation, it is recognition. This is why a novel can feel like it was written specifically for you, even when you share almost nothing of the author's biography. The book is not reaching your intellect. It is reaching something older and deeper than that. The contract has two sides. The writer's side must access the archetype as lived truth, not as a device, not as a convention. There is a difference between a warrior bond written from the outside, as a literary effect, and one written from inside the knowledge of what that bond actually looks like, what it costs, what it sustains. Readers detect the difference, usually without being able to articulate it. The reader's side meets that genuine access with their own preloaded recognition. They do not need to be educated about what loyalty means. They do not need to be told that betrayal stings. They do not need to be coached to feel the weight of a broken code. They already know. The writing only needs to give them something real to recognize. And the contract breaks the moment the writer substitutes explanation for experience. So here is the takeaway. Stop teaching your reader how to feel. Locate the truth, render it with specificity, and then step back. Trust the human being on the other side of the page. Their wiring is older than your novel, older than the novel as a form, older than writing itself. Your job is not to fill them up. Your job is to give them something real enough to recognize. That is where fiction stops laboring and starts landing.